Go for it.
Who's your tzaddik?
Okay. So what I want to look at is actually something that I've never really looked at before, and that is the sons of Noach, because the Torah presents them in two ways, and let's try and understand what is actually going on. So if you look last week's parasha, when it spoke about Noach, just before it told us about how Hashem was decided that He's not going to allow the world to exist in the way that it did, and that people can only live for 120 years. The Torah tells us about this person Noach. That Noach is born, and Lemech is the son of Lemech, and he called him Noach because he's going to bring some type of comfort to the world. Rashi explains to us that comfort means that he was going to develop. That Lemech saw with some type of Ruach HaKodesh that he was going to develop the plow. We know that the land was cursed. The land was cursed. It wasn't easy for it to bring forth any type of produce. And so therefore, once he had a plow, he was able to make it much easier. And then the Torah says, kind of like in the middle of everything, it says, that when Noach was 100 years old, and at that point in time, he gave birth to Shem, Cham, and Yafet. On that, Rashi points out that it's very difficult to understand, because everybody else gave birth around 100, had children around the age of 100. See, I don't feel so bad at 50. I'm having children, right? But everybody else had children around the age of 100. So how come Noach had children at the age of 500? So the Rashi explains that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said that he's a bit concerned. Obviously, people have free choice, and since people have free choice, the children of Noach will decide in their lives whether they're going to be tzaddikim, whether they're going to be rishayim, or they're going to be righteous people, or they're not going to be evil people. And but HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew that there was going to be a flood. That he had already decided. Since he already decided that, what he did is he gave Noach the opportunity to have his children at a much later stage, just before the flood, in order that they wouldn't yet be of age, of the age of punishment. Since they wouldn't not yet be of the age of punishment at the time of the flood, it wouldn't make a difference whether they were tzaddikim or rishayim at that point in time, because they wouldn't be punished, and therefore they would go with him into the teva. And that's why it speaks about them here at this point in time. But what it does say is that he has 3 children: Shem, Cham, and Yafet. Shem, Cham, and Yafet. But if we understand that Yafet is actually the oldest. So if Yafet is the oldest, so why is it that the Torah mentions the order of Shem, Cham, and Yafet in that way? And the Rashi says the following: So it's interesting, because the Torah says that Rashi explains, that the Torah will always present the person who's a tzaddik. Who's the person that is a tzaddik? That person that is the tzaddik is Shem, because Shem was born Mahu. He was born brisk already. And not only that, Abraham comes from Shem. Abraham is the progenitor of the Jewish people, and so therefore the Torah mentions Shem first, even though he's not the oldest. But now, if we go now into Parashat Noach, and then we see also the fact that the Torah says, Eile told of Noach ish tzaddik tamim haya b'dorotav, that these are the generations of Noach. Noach was an ish tzaddik tamim haya b'dorotav. He was this righteous person, tamim haya b'dorotav. He was pure in his generation. Et Elohim italech Noach. Noach walked with Hashem, and we know that there's this strange Rashi where the Rashi tells us about Noach. It says that he was tamim haya b'dorotav. So the Rashi quotes from the Gemara, which says, "Yesh min rabotenu dorshim oto l'shevach." Some say it was a great thing that he's called tzaddik b'dorotav. That if he could be a tzaddik in his time, how much more so he would have been a greater tzaddik in any other time when people weren't as totally off as they are now, at this point in time. Or there are those who say that it's a terrible thing. Tzaddik haya b'dorotav is only tzaddik in his generation, because he had been in any other generation, he would have been considered to be nothing. It's like being the tail of the lion or the head of the fox. That's what's going on here. Is what was Noach, but comes along the Rashi, and Rashi says Et Elohim italech Noach, that Noach walked with Hashem, and Rashi there says that you have to contrast him to Avraham Avinu, because with Avraham Avinu it says that Avraham Avinu walked in front of Hashem. Hitalachti lefanav. right? That he walked in front. But Noach was different. Noach walked with Hashem. Noach walked with Abraham, was able to go on his own because Abraham was such a powerful tzaddik. Noach had to rely on Hashem as some type of support, which is a very negative display of who this man Noach was. But and so therefore we have this image of Noach from these Rashis that he wasn't such a great person. And then the Torah says, "Vayoled Noach shlosha banim et Shem et Cham et Yafet," and there's no Rashi on that. And what bothered me is that why is the Torah once again telling us that that Noach has these three sons, Shem, Cham, and Yafet? And the Sforno gives us an answer, because the Sforno isn't as critical of Noach as Rashi is. And it would be interesting to really understand why Rashi is so critical. But the Sforno, Italian commentator, he says that the following, when it says that Noach walked with Hashem, halach bidrachav lehetiv lezulato, completely not what Rashi says. Rashi kind of seems to be saying that Noach had no engagement with other people. He didn't try to build them. He didn't do what Avraham Avinu did and go out to do. Let's be what today we would call kiruv. But rather, he was very much on his own. Comes this father and says, no, Noach went. Halach bidrachav, he went in the way of Hashem. Lahativ lezulato, to help others. Says, and he comes on the Sforno and he quotes the positive. He says that Noach went out, you know what he did? Noach went out and he rebuked people. He told people, you guys, you can't do what you're doing. You have to change your ways. You have to become better. And it's fascinating because the Sforno quotes a historian. There was a historian, Barussi HaKaldai. Barussi HaKaldai is from the 3rd century BCE. So we're talking, and the Sforno is writing in the 1100s. So you're talking about 1,000 years before that. Is that this historian Barussi HaKaldai wrote about this man called Noach? That's the Sforno that quotes. He wrote about this man called Noach. That Noach went out and he rebuked his fellow man to try and get them back on the path to ensure that the world would not be destroyed. He didn't succeed. He maybe wasn't such a great kiruv personality. He didn't succeed. However, says the Sforno, that's why this pasuk comes and tells us about the birth of the sons of Noach. Because, says the Sforno, when is it that he started having children? You know why he only had children at 500? Because at the age of 500, he had the confidence and the drive to be able to start trying to get people to change their ways, to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the right way. And it was at that point in time, from the minute he started to rebuke, to start doing this kiruv that he tried to do, he was zeichel abanim. He merited to have these children, and therefore there's a direct connection to the fact of who he was, the fact that he has these children. Whilst earlier on it's telling much more of the history of Noach, now it's telling us about Noach and the person that Noach was. That he wasn't just a person that was kind of kept to himself, but rather, says the Sforno, he was a person that tried to change the world, which I think is a very nice picture. It's a very different picture from Rashi. And that gives us something different to picture and to understand who Noach was, that he deserved to be saved by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then the Torah carries on and it says, that the world became fully corrupt before Hashem. What does it mean, corrupt before Hashem? It means that, we know that there's a halacha, there's a difference in the payment when a person steals a sheep and when a person steals a cow. Because when this person steals a sheep, there's certain things, there's a certain level of embarrassment, there's a certain point he has to carry it. So there's certain payment differences. There's certain ways in which the Torah recognizes a person's self-consciousness. But when it says, it shows that the people had absolutely no self-consciousness whatsoever. Rashi explains that it means they were involved in unbelievable lewdness and avodah zarah and serving idols, that completely separated them from the basics of human decency that had been instilled into Adam and all the way through generations and what should have been. And because of that, Vatimalei Aretz Chamas, and Rashi explains that the world was filled with gezel, it was filled with violent theft. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees the land, ha'aretz, right? Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz. That's the first things in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's head is this image of this land filled with beautiful things and prosperity and people building and developing and going all around the world. But all of a sudden, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees that the land has become corrupted itself. Why? Because the choices that were made by people and the choices that were made as a result of the manner in which they decided to live their lives completely destroyed the world. As Rashi explains, it was so bad that even the natural order of the world of simple instinct was also completely corrupted. The Sforno says something a little bit different. The Sforno says that what does it mean? It's on its own, it was completely corrupted. So what he says is the following. He says, because until this point in time, there had never ever been punishment. No one had been punished. No one had to face the consequence of their actions. And because the world just kept going without any consequences, therefore people felt that they could do whatever they wanted to do. And so everything was a makalkel. It just completely became destroyed. And so therefore this Noach really, if you can think about it, was fighting against a world that is completely corrupt and a world in which there is no consequence to the actions that you do. So he gives zoiche to these three children who are going to be the progenitors of the world, and the rest of the world is going to be destroyed in order to restart again. Have a beautiful day, everybody. Please God, we'll continue tomorrow with the next exciting episode of Parshat Noach.